In this video, I want to share some valuable insights into Krystian Zimerman's technical habits. I'm doing this not only to entertain you, hopefully, but also to give you some practical ideas that may genuinely help improve your own piano playing. Zimerman's technical perfection is legendary, of course, so here's my take on why that is. There are several reasons, of course, but I'll focus on the ones that seem the most important and the most obvious to me. And please share your own thoughts in the comments. First of all, he has beautiful, exceptionally well-built pianistic hands, and a lot of people underestimate how much natural ability and inborn physiology really matter. Right now, I'm working on a separate video about smaller keyboards and small-handed pianists, and the deeper I go into that topic, the more I realize just how much physiology matters. The truth is, when we talk about technique, the kind of hands nature gave you is at least 50% of the story. If you happen to have awkwardly built hands, weak or unreliable tendons, or a shape and size that are simply not ideal for piano, then becoming a truly great pianist will be much harder. You can become a very good pianist, but becoming a great pianist will be almost impossible, I would say. I don't say it's impossible, but it's almost impossible. Because unfortunately, piano pedagogy likes to sound very democratic, but anatomy is very objective, and that's why sometimes it feels really cruel. Reason number 2, Zimerman has fantastically good hand position and playing habits. Either he's just that gifted, or he had an excellent teacher, the first music teacher, who helped shape these habits very early on. Probably both, actually. And you can see that his hands are almost always in what we would call a natural curve, stable, balanced, and super efficient. And his position changes are also incredibly economical. For example, one of the most common technical problems in piano playing is poor thumb technique, where people don't really know what to do with their thumb and how to change positions and scales and arpeggios. And I actually have a separate video on that. Check it out, of course. And of course, I teach all those crucial skills in my technique rebuilding course, which you can get at a very good discount right now if you act quickly. But if you want to see how a real pro changes positions in a scale or arpeggio, there's nothing more useful than watching Zimerman's videos at half speed. But one thing that is certainly a result of Zimerman's own nature, the result of like how his brain functions actually, is his extreme efficiency of motions and how reduced are all the motions. He plans his movements and even the amplitude of those movements so carefully that, to be honest, it can almost look like boring. There is no drama, no finger choreography, no theatrical suffering. He only does such artistic gestures in some specific spots, and also I think that he kind of plans such moments. But when it comes to technically challenging passages, he switches to this kind of robotic, almost robotically efficient way of playing, and it almost feels kind of boring actually. Everything is so calculated, so efficient, and I admire it at the same time, but at the same time, I kind of lack drama, I lack kind of, drive. And here is a very, very important point about technical efficiency and tension, which you must be aware about. When many learners try to get rid of tension, when people decide like, okay, now I'm going to be free, I'm going to play without tension, they often go to the opposite extreme, like loose, sloppy, and exaggerated, oversized motions. So then they end up with this kind of like... And then they come to me and say like, Denis, I'm free of tension, I have no tension whatsoever. Why I can't get what I want? But the freedom at the piano, the absence of tension in your arms, in your neck, in your shoulders, in your wrists, does not mean moving more than necessary. So you have to clearly understand the difference between those being free of tension and being inefficient in your motions. So what you need is to develop very, very fine control and awareness of the fingertip movements. And you have to be able to produce very tiny, surgically precise fingertip motions, being relaxed in the rest of your body, but without unnecessary motions. So when you practice, you can try to reduce all the motions and being aware of your fingertips and being aware of the freedom but absence of motion in the rest of your body. But especially when you play some crispy passages like this one from the Chopin's concerto, or anything like classical. So anything like that needs such a fine control, such subtle motions. And Mozart is actually one of the best composers for developing this kind of control. And I'm very happy to announce that I've just released a new bundle of courses dedicated to Mozart, which you can get at a fantastic price if you act quickly. And this is more than just a course, because you will get access not only to my detailed tutorials on a number of famous Mozart pieces suitable for both beginners, like those C major variations. We are going to cover them as well. But also we're going to cover a range of advanced pieces like a C minor fantasy and F major sonata, C minor sonata, A minor sonata. But also I include lectures on the style, aesthetics, and works of Mozart. And even we have a special lecture by Frederick Weiner on Mozart's structure and compositional language. So this is a very massive bundle of courses, and you can get them at a very, very good price if you act really quickly. So if you want to be among the early birds and get this bundle at the lowest possible price, this is the best moment. Even very fast, awkward passages look as if Zimerman is doing something completely easy and trivial. Most pianists would make a lot of unnecessary motions here and struggle quite a bit. There are, for example, two main issues which I encounter when teaching such spots. First is that people very often don't prepare switch between the first level and the second level of your keyboard. So switching to the black keys needs a preparation in advance, because if at this spot your thumb is so far away, then of course you will need to have a very quick and awkward motion to deliver to the black key. So when approaching a black key, you have to plan your arm motion and go in the keyboard in advance. And here my thumb is already next to the black key, which makes this motion easier. The second problem in this spot is that very often people follow inertia when they play like this, and the arms follow inertia. So then you have to return your arms again. You see that? It's very hard to play like that because you have to do wider motions. So the trick here is to gain stability in the fifth fingers, but avoid inertia movement. And you plan such motions in any tempo in which you can actually coordinate them very, very precisely. And then very, very gradually you raise the tempo, fighting for the same degree of efficiency. But I have to say that, of course, this part is tricky on its own. But if you have such a large hand as Zimerman has, when you can reach that 10th without stretch, and I can partially relate to this because my hand is also not very small, but I can see clearly that Zimmerman's hands is even bigger. But this is just a very big natural advantage when you can play that quickly without tension. If your hands are smaller, then unfortunately you will need to make larger motions to reach all those distant notes, which of course in turn will decrease efficiency. So unfortunately, again, we come to an unfair world where some people just have advantage and some have to struggle more. He's basically using just finger motions here, but the truth is that for many learners, this passage would feel very awkward if you just play that with fingers, because of that fourth finger here. So in such a case, a simple inward motion in the keyboard into the keyboard for the fourth finger would help a lot, but Zimerman simply doesn't need it, right? So while we admire pianists like Zimerman, at the same time, we also have to accept our own technical limitations, if we have any, and learn to work with what we have. And for most learners, it means being more aware about how we can coordinate our bodily parts in order to play more efficiently and with less struggle. Zimerman apparently really has big hands, because what is especially striking is that when he reaches a ninth here, there's absolutely no trace of stretch. His hand actually looks like kind of very compact and closed. But a part of that, a part of those wonderful hands he has, look at how Zimerman amplifies his natural gifts by minimizing motions to the absolute extreme and releases tension instantly. Each chord here is played on a separate elbow impulse. Yes, and releasing the tension right after each chord. So he is not using more effort than necessary, and he releases the fingers instantly, basically after each strike. And here's another completely universal tip you can learn from him. The faster we play, the lighter we play. The rule is simple. The impulse to press a key can originate from different parts in the body, but it is always a trade-off between speed and energy. For example, we can play using finger impulses, like that, but it will be fastest, but also the lightest. Or we can use, for example, wrist or elbow impulses, like this. So now I'm not only activating fingertips, I also provide small impulses from the elbow. You see? And it allows me to play with a stronger sound without any tension very efficiently, so I can play like that for hours, not being tired, but it's a little bit slower than just using fingers. Then, of course, I can provide a sound from the shoulder, to provide an impulse from the shoulder. This is even mightier, but it's even slower. And I even can provide an impulse all the way from my core, like that, right? Which will be even bigger. We can reach even bigger sound, so useful in late romantics and like pieces like Rachmaninoff, let's say. But it also takes even more time. So the farther away the impulse comes from the finger, the slower it becomes. In other words, to remain efficient, if you really want to play without struggle, without being exhausted, you either play fast and light with rather finger impulses, or you play louder with elbow or shoulder impulses, but also a bit slower. In my technique efficiency course, I explain a very precise workflow for mastering these skills. But most learners, unfortunately, try to do the impossible, play both quickly and heavily at the same time. That is usually where tension, harshness, and technical struggle happen. Here, you can clearly see that Zimerman uses only the minimum reasonable amount of pressure on the key. When he plays chords, he uses impulses from the elbow and releases the fingers immediately. But when he plays a faster scale passage, he becomes even lighter. His fingers are very active, but also very, very light. And here you can see a strategy that I also use very often. At the top and at the very end of the passage, he plays more broadly and more slowly, using elbow impulses for each note. And so for these notes, he provides separate elbow impulses for each note. That's why the passage is kind of slower here and sounds stronger. And this is, of course, absolutely reasonable, because this is a climax. Yeah, so it's absolutely okay to stretch. But when we get to the middle part of the passage, which has to be quicker, he switches to just finger impulses, stretching and adding heavier impulses only at the very end. Right? And this works great, basically, because you kill both rabbits. You play very dramatically, but also very efficient. And he uses the mass of the body only for rare, important notes, usually the ones that can carry additional time and carry very important meaning. One very peculiar thing I once read in an article about him is that Zimerman sometimes prepares several different fingering options for the same piece and then chooses one depending on the acoustics. Pianists can usually be divided into two categories: those who are extremely serious about fingering and plan everything very carefully, and those who barely think about it and play with random fingers. I remember music, not fingering, such pianists say. I myself am somewhere in between. If I find a passage difficult or confusing, I plan the fingering very carefully and would never change it at the last moment before a concert, for example. But if a passage feels easy, I often use fingering that is fairly random and definitely not always ideal, I have to say. But to prepare several fingering options and choose one depending on the acoustic, that is really a whole new level of pianistic nerdiness for me. And I say that with huge respect, of course. What I do notice is, though, that Zimerman very often chooses fingering based on the really acoustic result he wants, even if that means sacrificing logic or physiological comfort. For example, you can often see that for especially important notes he wants to emphasize, he will choose the stronger third finger, even when the fifth finger would be a more comfortable and logical solution. For example, here, the fifth finger is really more like kind of logically reasonable. But the problem is that when you play with the fifth finger here, you are more likely to produce this kind of mild tenuto-like accent. And what Zimerman wants here, he wants roughness. He wants real crispiness of that dissonant, which is so rough. And very often pianists are very hesitant to play directly, to play in a straightforward, rough way, even when music requires this, because we are taught to be so cultured, to be so respectful as a composer. Oh, never, don't you dare to play harsh accents in Schubert. Schubert always has to be singing and so on. And I respect this standpoint very much, but sometimes music really demands it, and this dissonant has to sound provoking and has to sound unpleasant. And Schubert himself, not only he creates this, he also writes fortissimo in this spot. That's why Zimerman sacrifices physiological comfort and chooses to play this spot with the third finger to mark that interval. In a really rough way. So this is like a Witcher 3 combat where you just slice those NPCs to pieces and enjoy that bloodshed. It's so real, so awfully, disgustingly beautiful, right? And if you wonder why I didn't upload anything last week, this is because I'm doing my third run-through of Witcher 3, this time with my wife, actually, so we're enjoying this time very much. So if I accidentally disappear for a couple of weeks, I'm sorry, but now you know that I have a very good reason for that. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope that was enlightening and interesting. I see you in my comprehensive courses, which you can find by following the link below, and see you next time.